y'all, it is Jerica. I'm back for the second episode of Blackpacking, and I have a guest with me here today. His name is Esteban Gonzalez.
Hey, hello.
If you are listening to this episode, you probably listened to the last episode, which took place in Cape Town, South Africa. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring Esteban on to my show is because he recently went to Cape Town. What was your experience like there?
It was awesome. I learned a lot. I was very out of my comfort zone, and it was great. I felt like I needed that at the time that I went there.
And what brought you to Cape Town?
Love. Yeah, I was eloping with my sweetheart from like 10 years ago. Who's sitting outside on the front porch right now.
Well, yeah. So Esteban, like myself, lives here in Asheville, North Carolina, and we both grew up in Charlotte, actually, but we didn't know each other. But we met each other here in Asheville. So.
Yeah. I went to high school in Charlotte,
yeah. But you went to high school in Charlotte. Before that, you were living in Colombia, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised, I guess, for like 15 years. Yeah.
And where in Colombia were you exactly?
I was in Bogota.
In Bogota.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And
yeah.
I actually spent 3 weeks in Bogota.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Colombia later in the episode, but yeah, during your time in Cape Town, how do you feel like people perceived you, or what was your experience like outside of Cape Town being amazing, but how were your interactions with people there and or other travelers?
In Cape Town, I felt like I was in a completely different place where the people there didn't understand me. But somehow through traveling there, I felt like I understood them at a super deep level because I saw so many parallels. And I guess the most morbid one out of all of them is this mom was sitting in front of this tattoo shop. And I'm a tattoo artist, so it like really hit me that she was sitting there and she looked like she was under the influence of some crazy drug. She was like scratching herself like all over, but she had a little girl, and this little like 5 or 6 year old was having the time of her life, like dancing to Mo Bamba by Sheck West. And here we were like halfway across the world, like somewhere else, like, and I was looking at this, and then I had a flashback of going to buy video games with my dad and seeing like a very similar situation where this guy was cracked out. I could smell the bazuco, which is like what we call crack. And then his kid was like smelling it and like jumping up and down like really happily. And so seeing those two situations like made me feel like I'm like an outsider, but then I also felt very connected to like what was actually happening, and I like could feel the pain and the history and the layers of the place and relate that to where I'm from and where I live. And that was like a huge like learning experience.
Yeah, it's weird how like little things like that, like for me, what traveling has done has made me feel a lot closer to people. I think that's why I keep doing it. Yeah, like I get to see like really pretty stuff, but it helps me like try to understand like humanity more, and it's always like little moments like that. And I'm starting to get closer to just like thinking we're all so different, and like we have this like hate and fear between us, but like these places that we like live in and habitat are like all the same, and all these things are the exact same, whether they be like here or halfway across the world. It's just like culturally they're different because they're there, but all of these things we experience everywhere in little moments like that.
Oh, yeah. And then on a lighter note, I wanted to talk about the day before we leave, we're driving back on this highway. We have just gone up to hang out with the penguins. I can't remember what beach it was, but we were coming back down, and I look in my rearview mirror, and I happen to see a horse and 3 goats walking down a bridge. And I'm like, Sarah, is there just no people around there? And Sarah just looks back, and she's like, oh my God, no, those animals are just chilling, crossing that bridge. And I love that. That was like the most amazing, like, thing I've ever seen about the integration of like the wild world and like where we are. Like, it's amazing. I love. And you saw
the penguins too on the beach.
Yeah, they were just hanging out.
Hanging out.
What was that beach called?
Boulder
Beach. Yeah. Yes. Oh, I love that. The water was so warm and delicious. There's so many people in Cape Town. So many people that live in Cape Town, and so many people that are displaced from some sort of like either economic or like social circumstance into Cape Town. So there's all these perspectives. Like some people, like especially people like that are homeless, like would look at us and just say like under their breath like Americans, you know, like we would hear stuff like that, and that's kind of the first time I've heard somebody like referred badly about people from this continent, and it was good. Like, I needed it. It was something that, like I said at the beginning, I needed. But then there's, you know, so many other types of people there that are so willing to talk about what you do have in common, or like what your experiences were like, where you grew up, and there's a lot of similarities. So yeah, those people are ready. Those people are interested. They want to hear like what it takes for somebody from a developing country moving to like a country that is a little bit more established, and like they want to make those connections with you, and it's very cool. I remember being at the beach and talking to somebody about Colombia, and the conversation started with Pablo Escobar and drugs, and then it very quickly just like moved into soccer, and how this person like was a professional soccer player, and he used to like idolize like this one soccer player from Colombia. And then I was like, oh yeah, like Pablo Escobar like also was like friends with that guy, and he was like, no way, like that's amazing. And so it's cool to like show people the real story, not like the made up like Netflix Narcos story, like
yeah, totally,
which is like
as
fine.
You were saying, like people were saying like, oh, Americanas, how did that kind of make you feel, especially like being Colombian and not maybe being like recognized as like Colombian first? Did that have like any impact on you, or something that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because I don't know what those people were actually thinking when they were saying that. Like, they could have meant like, oh, these like Americans from the United States of America, but they could have also just been like, oh, this is like a tourist from like anywhere in America. And like that's what I took it as, because people that did have the curiosity, like people in the like parking, like people that help you park your cars in Cape Town, you know, you like give them a couple rands and it's like cool, which we have the same people. Like I've had interactions with people like that all my life, and it was amazing. They would specifically be like, you look like a Mexican guy or something, and it was really funny. I never had heard that in my life until I left Colombia.
Yeah.
And then it seems like everywhere I go, people are like, oh, you look like you're Mexican or something. Like, it's funny. It's hilarious.
Yeah. During my time in South America, when I would tell people I was from the United States, like, oh, gringa, and I was like, oh, you know, like I wasn't expecting ever to be called a gringa. It kind of like threw me off my first time too. I was like, I guess like it doesn't matter like if I am black, like I'm, you know, still an American, and to other people I'm seen as like, you know, a gringa, which was interesting.
Yeah, did you take it as like a negative thing or a positive thing?
I kind of took it as a negative thing. Like anytime someone was like gringo, I was like, no, like I'm not a gringo, but like maybe like how I view the term gringa is different than how they were like meaning it in the same way as like being like Americanos. So that's kind of why I asked you like that question, how you interpret it, because I was thinking about being referred to as a gringa and like not embracing that term whatsoever.
But I will say that in Colombia it's maybe not, it's like a good thing to be called, like we don't. So I think the origin of the word is like the Mexican military calling the U.S. military the green go because they were dressed in green and they wanted them to go away. That's all the English that they knew. So it was like gringo, gringo, gringo. So they became gringos because that, I think that's the origin of the word. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, like, I believe it.
So yeah, to them it has like a very negative connotation because it is like war related, but further down, like where we haven't had
it transitioned into just being like
somebody from the U.S.
Yeah, somebody from the U.S.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe I can embrace that term a little bit more next time, because I was hearing like, oh, white girl, and I'm like, from the U.S. I'm like, no, that is not the situation here.
Yeah, no.
So that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, overall, what were your favorite places in Cape Town?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, the Cape of Good Hope, which is like not in Cape Town, but like that was amazing. There was a specific coffee shop. My partner, who I married while I was in Cape Town, owns a coffee shop in town, and so a lot of what we do when we go to other places is go to coffee shops. So we went to Espresso Lab in this little kind of like artist compound that used to be like an old bread factory. And it was very scientific there. Like, stuff was very meticulously brewed, and it was delicious.
What we talked about earlier, you grew up in Bogota and moved to the States at 15, 16, yes. 15. What was that experience like for like you and your family?
Oh my gosh, it was intense. I used to live in like a kind of rough neighborhood, but because like guns are illegal in Colombia, to like most people. I mean, I guess some people are eligible for them, but you have to be a special case. But the violence that you see on the streets is a lot more like up close and personal. Like, so, you know, I've been robbed at knife point and stuff, and I was used to stuff like that, but moving to like lower, like very low class neighborhood in Charlotte was very intense. Like, there was very much so like segregated neighborhoods, and there was like literally a gang running each one of the corners, and they like shoot at each other like all the time. And some of that violence would also get into my school, but it does feel like Charlotte was like set up at one point to like fail some kids and help some others.
Absolutely. How many times have you traveled back to Colombia since living in the States?
I've traveled back 4 times.
4 times?
Yeah, I went. Yeah, when I graduated from high school to see my cousin get married. Another time just for vacation, and then for New Year's. Yeah.
Nice. And how does it feel being back there?
It's great. It reminds me of all the things that I like love and cherish in life, and like how good of a life I've had in the U.S. But I do feel like an outsider a lot of the time. I feel like an outsider. Like in most places, I think displacement is like a real thing. So like now I just feel like I belong everywhere rather than like one place. But like when I first went back, you know, I still like I had just turned 18, so I was like a baby, but I was like an adult, you know, so like I could drink there and I could drive there and like all these things. I don't know, it's great and terrible at the same time.
Yeah. Do you ever have that feeling that people think that you think you're better because you live in the States and you're like not still living in Colombia?
Yeah, especially people that are outside of my family. Yeah, so I've experienced that in the earlier times that I traveled there. I still was able to recognize a lot of the city without having to rely on like maps or looking around even. Like I just knew exactly where to go. So I could just pass as like a regular person. But since I've gone back, because of my style, which is like, you know, not indicative of like anywhere in particular even, you know, so like I'm wearing like soccer jerseys or anything, but like people just like notice that you're a little bit different, and so they stare. But you know, the majority of the people in Colombia are very polite, and so
very nice.
So yeah, nobody's gonna like confront you about something unless they're one of those people, and those are some interesting characters too. But yeah, it's like you feel like an outsider, but then they try to make you feel at home. It's just like a little bit like sweet and sour, I would say.
So my experience in Colombia, the first time I went to Colombia, I was coming from Ecuador, and I got dropped off at the border on the Ecuador side. And I get off the bus. I'm at the bus station. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to go to Colombia. It's like 2:00 in the morning.
Oh wow!
And I asked the guy, I'm like, how can I get to Colombia? And he was like, you can take a cab to the border, and then you can take another bus there to take to another bus station, and that'll get you where you're going. So I was like, okay. And I meet this other guy, and he was trying to go to the border as well. So him and I get in the cab together, and 10-minute drive, get dropped off at the border. He gets out of the car, he goes his own way, and then I get out of the car feeling lost. I see like 10 buses. It's like pitch black. I don't really know where I am. And these two people come up to me, and they were like, are you trying to get to Colombia? And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get to Colombia. And they asked me if I was Dominican, and I was like, no, I'm from the U.S. And they were like, are you sure? And I was like, I'm positive. And they were like, where are you trying to go? And I was like, I'm trying to catch the bus to Cali. And they were like, the next bus leaves in 10 minutes. It's the last bus of the night. Like, the only way you can go is if you get in the car with us. And I made the decision to get in the car with them.
Wow.
I felt pretty good about it. I hope my mom never listens to this podcast, because she would be freaking out if she heard this story. And I was like, are you sure it's safe for me to go with you guys? Like, I was like, I'm kind of nervous. And they were like, no, this is what we do. We just like drive people like across the border. And they're like, are you sure you're not Dominican? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure I'm from the U.S. And I was like, can I take a picture of your license plate to send to my friend just in case you guys rob me? And they were like, yeah, like that's fine. So once they did that, I felt a little bit safer going with them. And it ended up costing me 10 American dollars. And so they ended up taking me, and like we crossed the border. And it's a brother and a sister, and they're just like talking to me, and I'm just freaking out in the back seat. Like, what have I done? Like, why have I made this decision? But I'm still here. And so, you know, it worked out. They dropped me off at the bus station. And then I took a bus to Cali. But this was my mistake. This was my one big traveler's mistake. No. During this car ride, I like watched them drive by the immigration building at the border on the Colombian side. And I was like, hey, don't I need to like get a stamp on my passport? And they were like, no, you can get one once you get to Cali. And I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like, because I'm thinking that they're probably like maybe not open at that time, but that's like not true. Immigration offices are open 24 hours. So I get to Cali. The second I get off the bus, I run up to this group of police officers and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get to the immigration office. And at this point, it's like 4:30 in the afternoon. And they're like, closes at 5. You won't be able to get there until tomorrow. Like, why do you need to go there? And I tell them this story and they start laughing at me. Like, you dumb tourist. Like, why did you do this? And they gave me the address but at that point I was like, I didn't want to stay in Cali for the night, so I decided to go to Medellin after that. And so I go to Medellin and I had planned on staying there for a few days, so I was like, I'll go to the immigration office there. First day I get there, go to the immigration office, and I explained to them the situation, and they were like, yeah, we know this happens all the time. There's a fine for this, for entering our country illegally, and it was $250 American. And the guy told me, hey, you can either pay this right now or you can go back to the Ecuador-Colombia border and get your exit stamp from Ecuador and then your enter stamp into Colombia. So those are your two options. And I knew I was about to spend a month in Colombia.
Oh my God.
And I wanted to go up to the coast. So after Medellin, I go to Santa Marta and Taganga. And by this point in my trip, I had lost my debit card twice from putting it in the machine, and instead of getting my debit card back first and then the money, I would get my money and then forget that the machine had my debit card in it. So I had, at this point during my trip, had been sending money to myself through Western Union and going to Western Union and picking it up.
Oh my God, what a nightmare.
So that was kind of a pain, but I was making it work. And so then I get to Santa Marta, had sent money to myself through Western Union, go to pick it up, and they're like, oh, you can't pick this money up because you don't have a Colombian stamp on your passport. And I was like, no way. So then I was kind of stuck in Santa Marta with no money, and luckily one of my friends from back home had friends that were in Taganga, and I met up with them, and they were able to get the money for me.
What are the odds?
Lifesaver. I mean, crazy things like happened on this trip, but it was all like learning lessons for me, and everything ended up working out. So I'm spending time up by the coast. And earlier in this trip, when I was in Ecuador, I had met these two Colombians, and they were moving down to Chile. But I met them and like stayed in communication with them while I was still in Colombia, and kind of like getting their advice on things to do and see. And when I told them I was heading up to Santa Marta, this girl texted me and she said, "Be safe. Watch out for the Negroes there." And I still to this day don't know how I felt about that text. Maybe just about the same way as like the gringas thing, but it was like weird because I knew what she meant by that, and it like wasn't offensive.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't trying to offend me, but there was like some racism behind.
Yeah, totally.
That. And it was weird that she just like said that straight to me as if it like wasn't going to like bother me, and like it did and it didn't. Yeah. And I started thinking about like racism existing in Colombia, just because at this point I had probably spent a week and a half in Colombia, and I personally didn't feel any racism. Colombia is one of the safest countries I've ever felt, and like very like welcoming as far as the people. But she like said that to me, and I like didn't know. I think I like laughed it off because I felt so awkward that she had just said this to me, and I didn't know how to respond. And because she spoke no English and like fluent in Spanish, so I didn't even know how to respond to this in Spanish.
I mean, I think Colombian people are inherently racist. Yeah, that's like I think it's more the irony of different races that like makes some of them like act on them. But systematic racism is also there, you know, just like it is in like Cape Town and every other city that I've been to. Really, like it's super sad. I think people of color in Colombia are definitely seen as like less, especially in certain areas. Like so like when she's like talking about Santa Marta, or like when people talk about Choco, like they don't give them like the benefit of the doubt that they're just people sometimes. You know, it's like they choose to stay there, they like it there. It's not, they're not subjugated to those things, but you making those claims and talking about them that way does create a collective consciousness of like, I'm not gonna go to these places or like help these communities out because you know you've been told not to.
Exactly. And I think why I had just like inner conflict with her making that statement was because to me like those people like on the coast were still Colombian. Their skin just like happened to be darker, obviously, because they're Colombians that have for years and years and years been living by the coast. And so that statement to me was like so interesting.
Yeah, and I mean like a lot of those people are like originally from like, those are like some Aboriginal like lineage people, you know, like these people have been there long before anybody else.
Long before anybody. Yeah,
and like their bodies are like made for that place, and like it shows. Like it's great. Like there's like a lot of drug ports that were set up in those places as well, and of course like organized crime would like target communities of color. So like there is a kind of like Al Capone like mentality in some of those areas because that history is there. I think going to like the more like mountainous, like segregated, like rainforest areas is much more dangerous than just going to like Santa Marta or like anywhere else.
I experienced that as well, kind of during my time in Colombia, and then after telling people I went to Colombia, like there's this huge stigma about it being super dangerous, and just like that there's drugs everywhere, that there's just like crime everywhere, and that was like not the case for me. Like I said, it was one of the safest countries I've ever like felt, but it's also because they're very like kind of militarized and like policed in the streets at the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they're like, Colombia in my opinion is trying like really hard to like clean up their act and like not have the rest of the world view them as this Pablo Escobar place. Like they want to be like, let us show you how beautiful Colombia is, and I felt so welcome there.
Good.
In every place. So that's all I got for this episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you, Esteban, for coming on and talking with me. I really appreciate it. It was lovely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Bye.